You're not ready? Oh, okay. All right, welcome everyone. Thank you very much for joining us. I'm Sanjay Raman. I'm the Associate Vice President for the National Capital Region, and I'm pleased to welcome you to our next installment of our continuing Science and Technology and Policy, and I think we should add innovation to that title. Well, maybe that'll be our next action item. Leadership Lecture Series. I'm really excited to have a real leader in innovation entrepreneurship with us for this evening, and looking forward to the discussion. I'm pleased to introduce Donna Harris. She's the co-founder and CEO of 1776, and I think she's going to tell us about 1776 and how it interacts with the innovation ecosystem and how universities, I hope, can play a role in that. Donna's a four-time entrepreneur. She is also an active angel investor and a co-founder of K Street Capital. She served as managing director at Startup America Partnership, focused on accelerating the formation of vibrant entrepreneurial ecosystems. Prior to that, she was the vice chair of Interpoint Group, a government markets, government relations and public affairs strategy and management firm. She previously also was founder and CEO of Kinder Street, which sold software as a service solutions in the education, sports, and recreation markets. She was also Vice President of Strategic Planning, Marketing, and Product Management for Centrumine, a provider of web-based clinical and fiscal systems in the health and human services industry. So as you can see, tremendously broad background in a number of industry sectors. She's a member of the Global Entrepreneurship Network Board of Directors, a board member of the National Center for Entrepreneurship and Innovation, and an entrepreneur in residence at Georgetown University. She holds a bachelor's degree from Central Michigan University, and most importantly, an MBA from the University of Michigan Ross School of Business. Go Blue. So I'm pleased to invite to the podium Donna Harris.
Great,
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Boy, don't you always hate when we start with the boring bios where you're reading on and on and on and it doesn't make any sense to you? So we got to the most important part last, which is Go Blue. But I'm really, really thrilled to be here. It's the first time that I've had a chance to visit this particular facility. So thank you for hosting me. And it's really great to see that not a lot has changed since I went to college. No one is sitting in the entire front row. Are we afraid the speaker is going to spit on us or call on us? I'm not sure what that is. Unfortunately for you all, I usually reward the people who sit in the front row with t-shirts and hoodies. So nobody will be getting the benefit of that today. So welcome. I'm really pleased to be here. I love times like this where I can get out and I can get to know you and I can share what we're up to at 1776. Anybody here in the room? I love it. We're moving down front. All right. Jot down your name and your email address and address for me. We'll follow up. Anybody here in this room actually been to a 1776 facility yet? All right, good job. All right, so let me explain a little bit about what we're up to. I'm going to dive into my deck, which will come back to why we're doing what we're doing, and it'll make a lot more sense when I'm done talking. So we are a global platform. Our objective is to leave no stone unturned on the planet to find the world's most promising companies. We want to find them, we want to fund them, and we want to help them grow. And the way that we do that, of course, is through capital, but it is also through what has become one of the most important currencies in our time today, which is through connections. And that isn't just to mentors and experts, it's to the institutions that they need to partner with, it's to politicians that may potentially need to change rules and regulations, and it's to the media and to everybody who can play a role in helping accelerate the pace that these companies grow at. So that all sounds well and good. You'll be a lot more excited about that when I get finished talking. So, another quick question. How many of you have actually met a startup? Okay, shame on you. Every hand in this place should be up. Because you have all met a startup. In 1903, with $28,000 in cash, an entrepreneur named Henry Ford launched a nice little startup called Ford Motor Company. Today, that company is obviously on the Fortune 500 list. They do $146 billion in revenue. But not too long ago, that was a startup. Or, I guess I can use this thing. Yes. It is not working. Or this startup, AT&T. This startup was founded by a techie. In our days, this would be the coder who had the idea for the app, but not necessarily the hustler who was out selling the software. But this is another great startup. Again, 150 years later, lots of breakups and shakeups, but this company is still a going concern, and in fact, it's a $128 billion startup. Or this one, an entrepreneur named Sam Walton. We all know him. First Walmart store opened in Rogers, Arkansas, way back in 1962, not that long ago. It is the #1 company on the Fortune 500 list, and they do nearly $500 billion in revenue. But it started with a guy and an idea. Or we know this guy, Mark Zuckerberg, started his startup. It was actually called Face Mash when it first started. Aren't we glad they changed that brand name? It literally, in its first iteration, attracted 450 visitors and 22,000 photo views immediately when it went up. Today, it has revenue in the multi-billions. And did you know that Facebook has more people belonging to it than live in China? Again, a guy and an idea. So if you know any of these companies, you've met a startup. Some of them are my favorite. Starbucks, love that. All right, so startups are not these quaint little ideas of companies sitting off with guys in hoodies drinking Red Bull, coding all night. If that's your idea of a startup, then we need to change that perception. And so today I want to do just that. So let's talk more about, who these people are and where they are and what they're up to. So it's very hard to utter the word startup without two more words, Silicon Valley. Right? When I say startup, isn't that one of the first things that you think about? And it's true. Silicon Valley is an amazing place if you're an entrepreneur. Since literally the 1940s, Silicon Valley has been the de facto global hub for entrepreneurship, hands down, without a doubt. If you were an entrepreneur worth your salt, that's where you needed to be, because that's where the money was, and that's where the connections were. And literally, this has been true for the decades since. But something fascinating happened that has changed the landscape. So 15 years ago, the bubble burst. If we think about what happened in 2000, we had the first iterations of the internet. We had the first iteration of things that were using the internet as a distribution platform. Things like groceries on demand. Right? Amazon had already launched. There were some early beginnings of the companies that are now the pillars of what we see as the digital economy. And when the market crashed and the bubble burst, it actually wasn't the end. It was the beginning, and here's why. So if we think about the few crazy years after the dot-com bust, there was something fascinating that happened in around 2002, which is this company called Amazon touched off a revolution. And no, I don't mean toilet paper on demand same day. I mean Amazon Web Services. Their stock price fell. They were struggling with the fact that they had all this infrastructure that they had built out for the web economy. And what do we do with that? So they launched Amazon Web Services, which began the generation of cloud computing. They weren't the only firm. There were several other firms, Microsoft and others, that had the same direction and the same trajectory. But why is the shift to cloud computing so important? And in fact, it is the single thing that has touched off a diffusion of startup ideas around the planet. So let's talk about why entrepreneurs would go to the Valley. I was an entrepreneur. I built an ed tech company. I built another ed tech company. I built a health company. I did it in the entrepreneurial hotbed of downtown Detroit. Something a little crazy up here to do that back then. But I got told over and over and over again, go to Silicon Valley. And why is that? It's because it's where the money was. In my first company, when I launched it, to create the first version, to see if my idea would actually float, you actually had to build the first version of the product and get people to use it, which meant a lot of investment in software and a lot of investment in hardware and hosting and rack space. So literally, for me to get my first version of the product out the door and launched, it was about $3 to $5 million. So when the bubble burst, people had a lot of money in companies because it was really, really expensive to get that first version of the product developed and into market before you ever knew if a single customer would buy it. Today, if I were building that exact same company, I could do it and lop several zeros off that number. Right? Because there are so many ways now for me to access infrastructure without having to pay for hardware and hosting and rack space and servers and all the infrastructure that comes along with it. And it's much easier for me to access developers on a global scale. And so even at 1776, our developers are in Portugal, right? It's a global world. And so the number one reason that startups had to go to the Valley was disappearing, right? You could create a company on $10,000, $20,000, which meant it wasn't about the Silicon Valley venture capital firms. It became now about angels, seed investors. And by the way, those are usually local. They live in every city across the country and around the globe. And so it touched off this idea that the trek to the Valley was the only way you could succeed. And companies could begin taking an idea. I could come up with a concept and say, hey, why don't I test this? And I could quickly get a product out there and get it into market without having to invest millions of dollars. The other part that happened right after the dot-com crash is that revolution around social distribution platforms. So we had the launch of Facebook in 2004. We had the launch of Twitter not long afterwards, which we all love sharing our photos and tweeting things. I'm D. Harris in DC, in case you want to tweet. But what these platforms do is so much more. Because if you're an entrepreneur sitting in Cape Town, you can access the world from your fingertips. You no longer have to travel around the world to reach your customers and to tell them about your product, and to share information and messaging with them. And so this touched off really interesting changes in media and manufacturing. You had models like iTunes. I mean, when was the last time anybody went to a record store and bought an entire record album? Right? Now you just pick and choose, download iTunes, create your playlists, you got music on the go. What about in manufacturing? Right? How many Etsy fans do we have out there? Right? You can be a home producer. Good for you, owning it in the front row. You can be a producer of goods sitting in your living room, in your jammies, filling global orders, global distribution, again, available to anyone on the web. No middlemen, right? So what happens in these scenarios? Where's the middleman go? There's no need for the middleman anymore. And then we have this guy. How many of us have a smartphone? All of us, right? So 2007, the iPhone came to market. 2008, we had the App Store. Today, if you pull up the App Store, there are millions of apps that you can choose from. So not only can entrepreneurs reach you with their messages on Facebook and Twitter, they can put their product in your hands without shipping a single piece of software. There's no shrink wrap, there's no CDs coming in a box anymore, right? And you can pick and choose the apps, download them, test them. It gives you the ability to do free trials and so many different pricing scenarios. And so these platforms, combined with cloud computing, created an entire new way to think about what do you do if you have an idea? And where do you need to be? And how much money do you need to have in your pocket in order to take those ideas to market? So it's interesting if you think about the last 15 years since the bubble burst. So this morning and this afternoon, I was at an event with McKinsey. So we did a research study with McKinsey studying the global flows in the digital economy and what has changed in the last 15 years and to what degree are startups born global and to what degree does the digital economy completely change the way we think about products and services and goods and communication. And what we have found through this study is that we have entered this new era of digital globalization. It's no longer about shipping products across border. And in fact, the study, remarkably, if you calculate the value to the global GDP of the digital flows that are going across border, it is actually larger than the flow of physical products. The digital economy has overtaken the physical economy. And it isn't just about applying technology to the things we do today. It's about completely rethinking why we even do those things in the first place. All right, so what this all means is that it's completely revolutionized everything, right? How we buy, what we shop, how products are getting to us, the music we listen to, how we travel, how we interact with our family and friends, our entertainment options that are available to us. It's been a dramatic change in our lives. And in fact, if you look at some of the data, it's mind-boggling what is going on in the digital revolution right now. Every 60 seconds, users download 48,000 apps in iTunes. They listen to over 60,000 songs on Pandora and post 216,000 photos on Instagram. Every 60 seconds. So this is crazy, the volume and the magnitude to which we are getting online, we are accessing information, and we are sharing and engaging. But we have not even begun to scratch the surface on what this shift to the digital economy means. Haven't even started yet. If we think about where we are in the evolution to a digital economy, right? We've got the infrastructure in place. Al Gore invented this new fangled thing called the internet. It's in place. Much of the world is now getting online. We still have work to do to get all of the world online and connected, but we've made amazing strides in getting the infrastructure in place. And we've deployed first layer tools to get people online. You're shopping, you're listening to music, you're sharing your puppy photos online and looking at cat videos. And now comes the real wave, which is every aspect of our economy as we think about how technology and digital and data and social and mobile is going to come into our lives. It's everywhere, in the same way that electricity is everywhere. So when we think about what does this future economy look like, it isn't just using technology to do better the things we're already doing today. It's completely asking ourselves, why are we even doing those things, right? So this morning during the event with McKinsey, somebody asked a question in earnest, what happens to the bricklayer in the digital economy? How is it remotely applicable to the guy who's just layering bricks on a building? How do you digitize that? What does technology do for him? And my answer back was, why do we even need a bricklayer? Because buildings of tomorrow, will they even be built of bricks? Because we have 3D printers and we can print on demand materials from chocolate and food to clothing. And by the way, building manufacturers are testing the same technology to create buildings, right? So it isn't about thinking through the industrial era lens about how technology can improve what we do. It is letting that go and questioning every assumption underlying everything we do, because so much more becomes possible today. All right, so when we think about where technology can have its most impact, experts around the world agree that there are many industries that have yet to begin to even see disruption. I know you're surprised to see government on this list. So when we think about the power that technology can bring to our lives, it's industries like education and healthcare and agriculture and food and construction, all the things that are in the core of the economy. It's not about the low-hanging fruit anymore. It's about the meat and potatoes of our industry. And so when we think about technology, it's not any longer going to be about technology companies. It's going to be where we integrate technology into everything we do. And as I mentioned, someday people will look back on our time and chuckle that we talked about internet-enabled devices. In the same way we would laugh if I said a refrigerator was an electricity-enabled device. Right, it's the same analogy. All right, so what's fantastic about this revolution, no, that's not my dog, is that we can finally start answering the one question that I get everywhere I go. I get this question in every city I visit, which is, isn't there more to the internet revolution than puppies on demand and dating apps? And the good news is there is a whole lot more. And so this is where it starts to get really, really interesting. So when we think about the world we live in, you can get anything you want on demand on your smartphone. But almost half the world, 3 billion people, still live on less than $2.50 a day. We have poverty across our world. We have 3.5 million people in the US alone who, to some degree, struggle with homelessness on a regular basis. 250 million of the world's school-aged children cannot read, write, or do basic math. 780 million people lacking access to clean water. And by the way, that lack of access means that over 3 million people die every year from waterborne diseases. This is crazy stuff. With the power of technology, we can solve these problems. We can change the world. And that's what's going on right now, right? It's not about technology and startups and entrepreneurship, about unicorns and about IPOs. Those are funding vehicles, right? This is about what technology can do for people and for the world. And so when we think about the coming wave of innovators, they are focused on this kind of stuff. And they aren't asking themselves things like, well, this is the way the industry works, and so therefore I won't bother. What they're saying is, I don't care how the industry works. What I care is that technology allows me to rethink this completely. And they're unencumbered by the structures of the industry. They don't care who funds things. They don't care that something has existed for 50 or 100 years. What they care about is potential and opportunity. And that's what they're bringing about. So I'm probably the similar age to many of you in this room. So for me, when I was growing up, this is what the future looked like. Everybody knows what this is. Jetsons was one of my favorite shows growing up. And now I know why, right? So when we think about the Jetsons, they had these cool flying vehicles. Exactly. They had Rosie. Everybody remember Rosie? She was awesome. She would clean the house. She's a multi-purpose robot, which we'll find out in a minute. They had meals on demand. What do you want? Push the button, out it pops. They had telemedicine. And Rosie, here she is again, she also teaches class. Right? This was what the future looked like. When I was growing up, this was pretty far out stuff. Guess what? That's here. Right? So this is an actual self-driving semi. Much as you think self-driving cars are still a thing of the future, this guy is already on the road. It is driving itself. It does have a driver in the driver's seat, but he's not the one steering the wheel. Drones, right? Everything from package delivery to who knows what. When we think about the power of drones to go places that it's very hard or expensive or difficult for humans to get to. This is our equivalent of Rosie. This is a Roomba, right? Running around the house vacuuming. My dog loves this. Smart watches. The Jetsons had these back in their day. Today, you can actually buy over 75,000 versions of smartwatches on Amazon. You can have them delivered same day. This is what medicine is starting to look like. This is an actual doctor's appointment with the doctor visiting with the patient. And this is an actual classroom. This robot teacher is teaching English in Korea. The future is already loading. How many sports fans we have here? All right, I'm known to catch a good Michigan football game. If you read the sports scores and the results of the games, or how many watch earnings reports from Fortune 500 companies, right? If you read earnings reports, they are not written by a human anymore. Your sports reports, mostly not written by humans. A company called Automated Insights has created technology that actually does that writing for us now. And it is written, and you would not be able to distinguish the writing from an actual human's writing. Right, so when we think about the areas where we always thought humans are safe, robots will never get there. Of course they're making cars, but They will never write, "I'm safe." Not true. Technology is moving so incredibly fast, we can't even imagine where the world will be going. And so if we think about what that means, technology is not the issue. We could be doing far, far more to solve these big world problems than we are. The humans are the problem, right? Because we have this thing called bureaucracy and fiefdoms and politics, and we want to control things. We don't all agree on how to do that, and regulation becomes the place that all this begins to conflict. But if we can begin to get the people with the ideas and the technology know-how, together with the people who have access to markets, together with the people who make the rules, and we envision a future that allows us to rethink and to solve these big problems, imagine what we could do to solve some of these big world problems. So this has been our theory at 1776 for the last, well, we've been open for 4 years, but it's been our theory for the we've been open for 3 years, it's been our theory for the last 4. And our thesis is very simple. One, there are entrepreneurs everywhere. And the shift to cloud computing and all the changes that have happened in the market has enabled really smart people all over the world to take their ideas and to start working on them. Because genius is not centralized, right? And so let's go find those people. Because odds are they live in a city where they may not have access to the mentors and the experts and the customers that they most need to scale. So let's go find those companies. And our thesis when we launched was, we assume those people are there, let's go prove that that's true. And that's what we've done. So for the last 3 years, we've traveled to hundreds of cities around the world. And I have yet to visit a city where I couldn't find a critical mass of high growth startups doing really interesting things in areas like healthcare and education and energy and sustainability, transportation, food, agriculture, cyber, the really meaty stuff that our world needs. Right? So it's happening, and it's a global revolution that's going on. So let's talk about who these people are. So this is Rose. Rose is the CEO of a company called Hand Up. Now we run a competition every year, and that's a great way for us to scout companies around the world. Year 1, Rose was our winner. She lived in San Francisco. And so year 1, we thought, uh-oh, something wrong with our thesis. The winner is from San Francisco. But we went with it. So let me tell you a little bit about what Rose is doing. She was walking down the street one day, working on her iPhone, and she almost stumbled across a homeless person. And in that moment, it struck her, with all the power she had in her hands, there was nothing she could do at that moment on that phone to help that homeless person. And she could not let that go. And so she built, with her co-founders, an app called Hand Up, which allows you, at the point where you meet a friend or a neighbor in need, you can help solve that need. Not by giving them a $5 bill that you're not sure where that's going to go. You can make a donation that goes to a human service agency in that person's name for a specific need: a laptop, a security deposit for a new apartment, a suit for a job interview. And so it's the 3-way relationship between you, the person in need, and the human service agency to make sure that the money goes where it's supposed to go and the need is met. They have raised millions of dollars for homeless people around the country. They are launched only in 2 cities. When they go national, this company has the potential to be a multi-hundred-million-dollar company. For-profit, venture-backed, high-growth company making a major dent in a big social problem. All right, this is another one of the competitors. This is a company called Silverside Detector. I met this founder in Boston a couple years ago. It's hard to see, but the panels next to the truck, those are actually glass panels. Those glass panels are actually nuclear detection devices. It's embedded in the glass. And so their patent-pending technology allows them to turn any window, whether it's a building, or commercial or residential facility, into part of our defense safety net. This company, so year 2, we did our competition again. We scouted the globe, and we went from 16 to 20 cities in our second year. And our second year's winner was from Nairobi. And at first blush, when we met them, I scratched my head because his pitch was all about bananas and how he was getting the bananas from the farm to the point of sale quicker, easier, cheaper. And I thought, well, that's lovely. I love a good banana. Thank you very much. Next pitch. But when we peeled back the layers of the banana a little, what we found was he was actually building a distribution channel for any fast-moving consumer good to make its way into sub-Saharan Africa. But he had tested it with bananas in Nairobi. It's $1 billion business sitting there. But he's in Nairobi, where there were almost no investors. He wasn't pitching his business well or explaining his big vision, and had nobody surrounding him who really understands supply chain management and global distribution. We've since invested in him. We've helped him get connected to people like Coca-Cola's head of supply chain and companies like Amazon, so that he can really build the company that has the opportunity. And by the way, when he's successful, he will move much of the distribution, which in Nairobi, 98% of all fast-moving consumer products are sold at local kiosks. Right? They don't have Walmarts there. He will move that entire system to a cashless system, which is safer for everybody, but he will dramatically cut the cost of products for people across Africa. And as an investor, I love that because he's also going to build a really big business. This is a local company here to the DC region. It's a company called Local Roots Farms. They take these shipping containers and turn them into hydroponic farms. And they put these hydroponic farms right next to the Safeways and the Walmarts in food deserts. There's a phenomenal, highly scalable business here because it turns out that if you go to the city government, one of the biggest problems they're trying to solve is food deserts and how do they get healthy, nutritious food to people who live in urban settings and how do they do it inexpensively. This is an interesting alternative. All right, so in the same way that our lives as consumers have been changed, so too will our lives as citizens. Every part of our world has the potential to be changed. How we educate our kids, how we access healthcare, how we deliver and devices and the aids that help us not only think about reactive healthcare, but preventative healthy living. How do we travel, the food we eat, what we know about the food we eat, so many areas of the economy. So in the same way that we could never have envisioned the power of a smartphone 20 years ago, there are technologies that haven't even been invented yet that 20 years from now, we will not know how we ever lived without them, and they will have completely upended every element of our lives. So one of the things that we see is that entrepreneurs around the world really believe that the best way to predict the future is to create it, and that's what they're doing, right? So the cry that we hear everywhere we go is that we've been waiting for the government and the institutions to solve these problems. And they haven't. We still have them. And so let's go ahead and jump in and begin solving them ourselves. And the entrepreneurs are connecting to each other in a way that is creating a global movement. And what's fascinating is that that movement is also spawning a fascinating global peace opportunity. So when we think about the Challenge Cup and the cities where we are visiting to scout for startups, it's not just DC and New York and San Francisco, it's also Tehran and Islamabad, and places that you wouldn't imagine that entrepreneurship is flourishing. And when you go to those cities, what you find are entrepreneurs who don't care so much that you're from a different country. And geopolitical thinking and ideology takes a back seat to the thing that we share as humans, which is we want to solve these problems. And we're entrepreneurs, and we're following some of the same methodologies, and we're using the same tools, and we have similar visions for what entrepreneurship can create. And so there's an undercurrent of peacemaking that is going on as these entrepreneurs connect with each other. One of the most incredible experiences I've had in the last 3 years was when I visited Amman, Jordan. And the Queen of Jordan actually came to our event, and she was a pitch coach. And she was helping these startups rethink how to tell their stories. And by the way, she was an amazing pitch coach. But you had startups not just from Jordan. They were from all over the Middle East. every country in the Middle East. And they were gathered in a room and they were helping each other. And they were laughing and they were talking and they were forming bonds that to this day, many of them still talk and help each other, right? So this isn't just about how do I build a company and how do I make money. Those are great things, and I hope that those things happen for us and for all the companies that we're working with. But it's about building the kinds of companies that not only can solve big problems, they're the kinds of problems that are pivotal to our global economy. And the way that these entrepreneurs are solving those problems is leading to new avenues to drive common understanding and to drive peace. So it's exciting on all kinds of levels. Now, the second most common question I get when I travel the world is, why in the world are you guys called 1776? Anybody wonder that? And so when we first launched, we thought a lot about everything I just shared with you. And what we kept thinking about is that this is really creating a revolution. It's a revolution of ideas around the world. And back in 1776, these revolutionaries, these were the entrepreneurs. Right? They created the ultimate startup United States. Right? And the reason and the way that they did that was they questioned the establishment. They went around the norm. They took risks. They had a big, bold vision for something different. And they worked very much from the bottom-up collaborative way that today's entrepreneurs are working. And so we felt that 1776 was a very fitting name. Our tagline is where revolutions begin, which works really well in the US, not so much in other countries. We take maybe a less exciting view of a revolution. But the name and the connotation resonates everywhere because entrepreneurs see themselves as the new generation of these people, right? And so we very much, everything that we do at 1776 is designed to not only participate in what's going on around the world with everything I've just shared with you, but to be an organization that actually drives making this happen. And so we are traveling the world, leaving no stone unturned to find those promising entrepreneurs that may be living in very unexpected places. We want to surround them with people who can help them. So that's mentors and it's experts, it's pitch coaches, it's industry experts like heads of hospital systems and emergency room physicians and university presidents and CFOs of utilities, people who are very hard to reach if you're an entrepreneur cold calling people. We bring those people into our orbit so that it is very easy to help connect these startups to the people who can most help them grow. And we really believe that it shouldn't matter where you live as to whether your idea makes it onto the global stage. So we find them, we surround them not only with the people, but the curriculum to help them learn how to be an entrepreneur because it's tough to learn that. And then we connect them to opportunities for funding and for media coverage and to put their ideas on the global stage. And we do this through a very collaborative method. So we don't go in and own a local market. We work with whomever is running the startup hubs and communities in that local city. And so we've created a network of partners that blanket the globe called the Startup Federation. And that network is the first line of defense for those entrepreneurs in their local community. So if you're in Moscow, it's Digital October. And if you're in Berlin, it's Beta Host. And if you're in Nairobi, it's iHub. And if you're in Washington, D.C., or in Arlington County, it's 1776. And we all work together to help identify promising startups and to help each other's startups grow. And so this idea that entrepreneurship is diffusing around the globe, it isn't just a highly fragmented activity, it's actually becoming a highly organized activity. And the power of technology is allowing us to operate like one global startup ecosystem. So you get the best of what your local city has to offer, but you also get surrounded by an entire network that helps you globally. So it is a very, very different time. It is a very different model. And if we think about entrepreneurship through the lens of the past, you will miss what is happening around the world and where the best ideas will be coming from for tomorrow. So I hope that you will come and visit us. You will participate in our programs and our activities. You can participate virtually and physically in any of the cities where we are. We would encourage you to be a mentor, to come out and be an expert. Every single person in here has something that you could offer a startup to help them, whether it's opening doors, making introductions. Maybe you yourself have ideas that you want to bring out and to test. We would welcome you as part of the community. So I'm going to pause there and see what questions you all might have for me. Question in the back?
Yeah, can I just make one comment?
Sure.
So let me let the, sorry. So if you are asking a question, push the little vertical button, and your mic will light up red, and that way it'll go out over the live stream properly. And also, if you are on the live stream and you want to ask a question, we have this really high-tech method of emailing me at sroman@vt.edu, and assuming that it makes its way through the network, I will pass your question on to Donna.
Great.
So, okay.
All right.
So,
question in the back.
I thought your bring up of the bricklayer was pretty interesting. As technology continues to march on and people become more and more obsolete, what is the role of the startup community in helping the bricklayer, helping the taxi driver, helping the teacher that has been replaced by a robot be... Yeah, well, yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's the professor.
He's trying really hard not to say the professor. Yeah, it is a great question. So I came right from the event with McKinsey where we launched this research and the report, which if you just Google McKinsey digital globalization, the report will pop right up. And I encourage you to download it and read it. It was something that we spent a lot of time talking about today, and I believe it is likely one of the biggest challenges we face in this shift to the digital economy. And it is not a simple problem of the bricklayer is now out of a job, how do we get him a new one? Because it goes so much deeper than that. If we think about our educational focus, pre-K all the way through university level, the education system was designed for the day when we were living in the industrial era. And so mass production, standardization, we're teaching people to do a really good job of learning the information that's being reinforced by testing and Common Core and many of the things that are going on. And there's a big and growing recognition that the skills you need for the digital economy have nothing to do with knowing the information. Google knows the information. I don't need to know the information. I need to know how to get the information. I need to know how to be curious and how to analyze the information and make good decisions. And so what we're finding is that part of the reason it is difficult to help people be entrepreneurs is that they're missing some of the core skills of being entrepreneurial. Love of learning, curiosity, patience, being able to delve into a problem and figure out how to solve it in an unguided or unstructured way. We have entrepreneurs who very much just want us to tell them what to do. And that is just not how entrepreneurship works. So there's that layer. The second layer is that the bricklaying jobs are gone. And so what do we do with that person? I mean, I grew up in Michigan in the automotive industry, and you could see that problem coming a mile away. It was coming for 30 years before we fully recognized the impact of it. So getting out in front of the educational issue is the single biggest thing that we need to do. And if we look at the skills that will be most valued in the digital economy, it's creativity, it's innovation, because the computer can do many of the jobs that involve repetitious skills or things that computer-centered learning can master. But what it can't do is do the creation from nothing, and that's where humans really have the advantage. So we have to align how we're thinking about educating and job training and job retraining around those core skills in addition to the immediacy of how do you make a living. And the biggest thing that needs to happen around that is the state and local leaders need to really understand the magnitude of the shift to the digital revolution. Because it's not just about, the bricklayer is now carrying around an iPhone, right? It's about the bricklayer's job going away, and how do we get out in front of that as opposed to reacting to that? Because we've seen that example. That's the Michigan and the Detroit example, right? So it is hands down one of the biggest issues we face, second to the regulation that comes along with this kind of innovation. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Really fun talk. Thank you. I'm Sally Keller from the Social and Decision Analytics Lab here. And I was curious, when you look at 1776 and all of the things that you're doing, can you speak a little bit about how 1776 has gotten the resources together and what that network might be for sustaining what you do?
Yeah, so we had the benefit of launching. So prior to launching 1776, I was the managing director at Startup America. And it's a fancy way of saying I got the inside scoop in what's working and not working around the country, right? So I got paid to travel around and go to Chicago, Boston, San Francisco, Denver, you name it, I went there. And I got 2 years of in-depth analysis on what works, what doesn't work. And what I learned was in many of these communities, the people who are running the hubs in the community have wonderful, wonderful intentions, but they're not entrepreneurs. They've never built businesses. They got a grant from the city. The city had extra real estate that was sitting empty. And so, hey, we hear entrepreneurship is the cool thing. It'll help us create jobs. Let's go fill the space. And what we learned was it's actually not about the space. It's about the community. And it's about the connections that you can make for the entrepreneur. But the space became really important because when we got out and started talking with people about our vision, they looked at us like we had four heads because they didn't understand that startups weren't just in the Valley. They didn't understand that startups were doing more than, Facebook and Snapchat and WhatsApp. And so there's a lot of education that we do to make sure people understand this isn't just me and my opinion and my thesis. This is 5 years of really digging in and studying where is the global economy going and how do we get out in front of that. And we have the benefit of being headquartered in Washington, D.C., which is, when we think about the currency of Washington, D.C., it operates on who you know. Right? So how do we turn that into an asset for entrepreneurs? And the very first talk I gave after we launched 1776, I went into a room, there were probably 300 people, lobbyists, heads of associations, think tanks, and whatnot. And I asked them, how many of you have ever been asked to mentor a startup? Like 4 hands in the audience went up. And I said, now if I asked you, how many of you are willing to do that? Every hand in the house went up. And I said, that's the opportunity, right? And so what we've done is we've spent 5 years getting out and telling everybody we can tell about what's going on in the global economy, why that matters, why the institutions should matter, right? Because if you're an organization like MedStar Health or GE, you have underinvested in R&D because the economy has been tight. And meanwhile, these entrepreneurs are popping up everywhere like whack-a-mole. So you need to be at the table, not only to see the deal flow and the ideas, you can learn from these people because they operate very differently. And by the way, this is the culture your organization needs to take on. And so all of that works together to say that we very much wanted to make sure that it was something that the community felt a sense of ownership for. And so bringing in many institutions ranging from the local governments to the hospital system, the universities in the community, so that they feel a sense of ownership and how important it is that this is successful. The entrepreneurs themselves pay to be a member. We feel like it's really important that they have some skin in the game and that they take seriously the investment in being a member. And then we do events and a handful of other things as well. But we're not government funded. We're not receiving grants. We've never taken any federal funding. We feel like it's very important that these communities and this activity supporting startups needs to be self-sustaining because it's an important part of the infrastructure of any city. Because startups are no longer these quaint little things off to the side. They're the next businesses that will fuel our cities. Yeah.
I enjoyed your presentation. My name is Greg Wigton. I work for DHS Science and Technology Directorate. You mentioned the technology boom in the late 90s and then the bust that followed. I've been in a couple other presentations that have kind of discussed that maybe we're in another bubble right now for technology. Do you think that we're in a bubble, and is there a possibility of it busting in technology and the investment, the sheer amount of volume of investment, especially in Silicon Valley? Or do you think that this globalization of entrepreneurs that you've spoken of is kind of protected?
Yeah,
all of that?
It's such a great question. I get it a lot. So let's parse it out. Definitely there's something going on right now, right? So We've got companies that are staying private longer. They're raising massive, massive rounds at huge valuations. The backlog of companies that need to go public is enormous. And if you just do the math, there's never been the number of IPOs in a single year that we would need to get all the unicorns public right now, right? So it's not sustainable. And as we're starting to hear from Zenefits and a handful of others, all's not necessarily well in Kansas, so to speak, at some of these companies. And so, the interesting part about what's going on is that if you look at the unicorn situation, you look at the landscape, I challenge you to name a unicorn in the education industry. Like, I can't think of one, right? So there's a very big difference in how the companies grow and scale by industry. If you're in the consumer industry and you're facing the consumer and your Twitter, you got to continue to show that you're growing your consumer base and your revenue base, but not necessarily your profitability base. If you're in the education industry, it is very hard for you to scale without dealing with the school districts. It's just a very different model. And typically, companies in some of these industries where government plays a role, their trajectory isn't an IPO. Their trajectory is a merger or acquisition. And so what's interesting is that you're seeing an increase in investing in sectors that are outside the consumer-facing economy. So EdTech had one of its best years in terms of early stage and Series A investing last year. Healthcare investments are going through the roof. And what we're finding is even LPs, so people with money who want to put it to work, they're interested in diversifying geographically outside the valley. And so there's a lot of talk, and certainly we're in for seeing some of these unicorns fall. And depending on how much people really understand the broader economics at play, we may or may not see market tumbles attached to that. But what we advise people is this shift to the global economy is not going away. And the industries where we have yet to see digitization really take root, they represent the lion's share of our global GDP. So it is inevitable that entrepreneurs will innovate and succeed in these markets. And there is an enormous amount of return to be had from doing that. And so part of our strategy as we think about what do we do with that, we're certainly a venture investor. We operate 2 venture capital funds. But we are also thinking more broadly beyond venture because, as I said earlier, funding is just the vehicle. It isn't the measure of success. And so let's put that cart back behind the horse and let's make sure that funding is available, but let's focus on revenue growth. Let's focus on sustainability. Let's focus on the partnerships that these companies will need to penetrate complicated markets. And let's make sure that the people who might want to acquire them know about them and that they're all in the same orbit. Yeah, go ahead.
So thanks for your presentation. My name is Kenneth Wong. I'm in the physics department in the graduate school here. What do you think the role can be for entrepreneurs and organizations like yourself in addressing income inequality? Because when I look at what's happened in the economy over the last 20 years, the rapid movement of capital and the rapid movement of money and the changes in retail are really accelerating that. So where do you think your company could step in and address
We
that?
think a lot about it, and we have since even before we launched. It's why we're structured as a public benefit corporation as opposed to a pure for-profit. We have a dual bottom line. And our bottom line is about not only driving innovation in social areas, it's also about the impact that entrepreneurship can have on the communities that we're working in. And it is a real issue. I mean, it's about technology creating a jobless revolution, right? And the shift towards a contract workforce and who owns things like healthcare and retirement funds and all the benefits that have historically come along with employment when we shift to a contract workforce. And I don't think there are easy answers to those, but it is why government absolutely needs to be at the table in conversation around this revolution. But we very much focus on making sure that there's equal access to this revolution. So one of the programs that we launched earlier in 2015 is something called the Innovation Opportunity Program. And we've gotten private funding through foundations in downtown DC to run a pilot program to take people from underserved wards who are high school graduates and run them through technology training so that they can become UI, UX experts, coders, and developers, and frankly get on a path to see a 6-figure income. Right, so that pilot has been very successful. Those job candidates are now beginning their internships at MedStar, Capital One, Microsoft. They will have a 1-year apprenticeship, and then they will move into the job force. And so they're not only retrained, they've got a resume, and they're ready to go to be hired. We've been approached by cities where we have partnerships through the Startup Federation to see how that program can be duplicated in cities across the country and to be scaled so that anybody who's curious about technology and entrepreneurship can play a role. But that's only one small slice of what can be done. We think it's really important that the people who are driving the revolution be aware of their impact. We don't believe in the laissez-faire, let chips fall where they fall. We need to sit and have a conversation about what does this mean for the people who are being left behind, and how do we become a part of the solution, as opposed to just saying this is the way the economy goes and it will sort itself out, because it may not. It will take intervention. It will take strategies to make sure that it does.
You good? You want to take?
Yeah, no, it's good. Keep them coming. As long as you guys don't want your glasses of wine, I'm willing to answer your questions.
Hi. Just kind of tacking on to the question about the inequality and the bricklayer question as well. I mean, I read somewhere, I can't remember where it was, that we can equate this time to the time of the oil barons and the railroad barons, and that we need to do kind of some monopoly busting, because it's all about, companies are all about getting bought out. It's not about creating new companies, because there's these big companies that are buying them out. So what do you think about that? Is that something you guys have talked about?
So there are definitely parallels. I mean, if you're a student of history, studying how the Industrial Revolution started and took hold and spread, there are many, many parallels, and I think there are always lessons to be learned by looking at history to make sure we don't repeat the same mistakes over and over again. The study from McKinsey actually talks about this issue. And did you read it? Okay, well, you'll be reading it shortly. So it talks about the fact that two interesting phenomena are happening. One is that the big companies are getting bigger, and that the little companies are succeeding and innovating and taking off in higher quantity and quality. But the middle is being hollowed out. And what economists are struggling with is that a bad thing, right? Is the fact that these companies are all growing bigger bad? Is it bad that Facebook has a bigger population than China? Like, the rules for the new economy are completely unknown. It truly is the Wild West for the digital economy. And so this is what's causing people to scratch their head, to argue so much, but it's also why we're seeing a lot of the vitriol in politics. People are afraid. They don't know what this means. And so we've got a lot of work to do really quickly to really figure out what does this new digital economy start to look like. Because you think about government and government regulations, the rules around payroll taxes and the structure of our economy, these are things that were written how many decades ago, right? So every regulation in every area of our economy, someone needs to get out a magnifying glass and start going through it and asking ourselves, does this still apply? If it doesn't apply, what is the new rule? What becomes possible? And can we use data and information to make better decisions? So there's a lot of work to do here. And even at lunch today, the world-class economists that I was sitting around the table having lunch with, listening in awe and taking notes, was very much around, we don't even know if we're measuring the right things anymore, because all the metrics that we were using to measure whether our economy was on track, we don't even know if they apply anymore for the new economy, right? We still report on global trade deficit, but if you look at how that number is calculated, it's only goods. It isn't accounting for digital flows, right? So we need to rethink everything around the economy, and it's not just, what does an employee mean and who pays for benefits and is a contractor an employee? It goes much, much, much bigger than that. So I wish I had a better answer for you, other than not very many people know, but we have a lot of work to do.
Nick? Yeah.
So I was struck by two things when you were talking about the examples from history. On the one hand, a lot of those people, including the founding fathers, were some of the best educated people in the world. And on the other hand, when you were talking about what 1776 does, by being a place where you pull together people with particular expertise and you put people in an environment where they have access to that and to other resources, you're kind of describing the new university. I mean, that's what universities have done, right? We are the place where you have those people. So I'm getting a mixed message, but but I think both those things are true. And I wondered from your contest and your travels, how many of the ideas in these, that you see as really viable for these companies, how many of the ideas are dependent on a university education?
So there's a couple questions buried in there. So we very much view ourselves as a modern day educational program, right? And when we think about our objective is to find, fund, and grow these companies. But to do that, we have to teach the entrepreneur, because most entrepreneurs are new. They're first timers, and you don't know what you don't know. And entrepreneurship is a very experiential activity. That's just why business planning classes have never really been that successful. We send you to a business planning class, you go for 12 weeks, you write a big, thick plan, it becomes a doorstop somewhere, right? I mean, I wrote them. I have several from my Michigan MBA program. And entrepreneurs just don't work that way anymore. They're just-in-time learners. Many of them are ADD because they're running a company and they can't focus on taking the time to stop and go learn something. And so we've spent the last 3 years going, how do you solve that problem? Because for us to take these entrepreneurs from all over the world and help them grow, we have to tackle both the venture and the person together. And so that's very much what we do. But if you look at what becomes power in the digital economy, it's a very different definition of power in the past. Right? Power is about connections. It's about network. It's the social power that you have. And we've taken that concept and said, how do we apply that to entrepreneurs? And if you think about what entrepreneurs need, they need financial capital for sure. But if you talk to any investor about why they don't fund businesses, a specific business, what they will tell you is that person didn't have a fundable business. And so what that person actually needed was some intellectual capital and some social capital to help them figure out how to create a fundable business so I can then deploy financial capital. So the way that we've approached that is we've mashed up venture capital investing with a modern day MBA program to say, how do we start with the social and intellectual capital to surround you with everything you need as a person to learn about entrepreneurship in the context of your company and your idea you're building. And then I may deploy financial capital on top of that, right? So very much is a different viewpoint around education. It's very outcome driven around what we're trying to make happen. Around the world, the entrepreneurs that we meet come from every walk of life. We've had teenagers and retirees, college graduates and homeless people. It's been the entire span of the gamut. And, particularly outside of the United States, entrepreneurship has really taken hold as a way out for people, as a way to make change. I think that is less the case in the United States. We see a higher educated audience in the US. But even that is changing, right? If you think about when I was growing up, there were no movies about Mark Zuckerberg and startups, and there was no mainstream anything about startups. And when I went to start my first company, people thought I was going through some early midlife crisis. But today, these entrepreneurs, it's mainstream, right? In the same way that I would have thought about creating a not-for-profit if I wanted to change the world, they think about startups. So if you look just at the narrow lens of venture capital-backed companies, they do tend to skew higher on the education scale. If you look globally at entrepreneurship across the entire planet, it is very, very diverse in terms of education and background.
Awesome. Can I take the chair's privilege to ask you a question?
Yes.
At the risk of running into the reception here. So I think one of the, and this will be the last question, one of the comments you made early on as to why this digital economy has arisen is the low cost to entry of web services, and so a lot of the companies that you're talking about are software companies or app companies, but there's a whole set of industries, self-driving vehicles, autonomous vehicles, battery technologies, energy technologies that are much more technology capital intensive types of things. And there are examples of successful Tesla, et cetera, but the people that got to those companies came perhaps from PayPal or digital economy, making their money that way and then pushing it into other fields. So what do you see? Is the path to those kinds of companies, the Teslas, those types of companies, SpaceX, is the path to that through a digital software type of company, or is it through a large existing multinational, or is there room in this world for pure startups to come into that are more technology heavy? I guess that's a long question.
Yeah, so I think you're using the phrase technology heavy, but I think what you're really talking about is truly disruptive, big, bold businesses, right? Like Tesla's a moonshot versus how do I just, now I can flip the slides with this gizmo instead of my finger, right? So,
which we failed to do.
My finger still works. So a couple things. One is that the first year of Challenge Cup, I was super excited to get on a plane and travel around the world because I thought I'm going to go find all these awesome moonshot ideas. We're going to pick these big, hugely disruptive things, and we're going to start investing. But if I were to draw a pie chart for you of what percentage of that pool was incremental improvement on what we're already doing, we're just applying technology. How much is innovation? So we're using technology to do things a little differently. Or how much is disruption where we're completely throwing out what we used to do and doing something totally different? It was almost all incremental stuff, a handful of innovative ideas, and nothing that was truly, truly disruptive. That has changed over the last 2 years, but it's something that we've actually built now into our curriculum. So the first thing that we ask the entrepreneur to do, congratulations, you're accepted to 1776. The first thing we ask you to do is take a step back and really do discovery on the problem. Because what we find is that entrepreneurs aren't looking at the problem big enough, they're not looking at it boldly enough, and they don't have enough chutzpah to say, I can actually go solve it. So sometimes they suspect there's a really big, bold idea there. They're just not seeing it or confident enough or know the path to go after it. So we're trying to talk about it, speak about it, use the data to exemplify it. One of the best things, though, that has happened is Uber. So if you think about Uber, love it or hate it, everywhere I go around the world, it's been an inspirational rallying cry for entrepreneurs because they go, I never would have thought that you could create a massive multi-billion-dollar company in the taxi industry, right? Who would have ever imagined disrupting the taxi industry? If you can do it there, what else could we do it in? So there is this kind of poking around at it to see, but globally we just need more chutzpah to go after the big ideas. I think that's universal everywhere we go.
Thank you so much, Donna.
Yeah,
so
thanks for
let's
having
thank
me.
Donna one more time. I do have a parting gift for you.
Yay, goodie bags.
Yes, it's not that exciting. Thank you so
you.
much.
My
This
pleasure.
is fantastic. Everyone, please join us. I hope, Donna, you have a few
Yes.
minutes to partake of some wine, and hopefully we can continue the discussion out here. For everyone online, thank you very much.
Yeah,
See you
we're
next
just
time.
1776.vc, so anybody who wants to engage, check that out, connect with us on Twitter or LinkedIn, and come and be a part of what's going on around the world.
Thank you so much.
Thank
All right.
you.
Thanks, everyone.